But the adab of the Quran, Bab al-Awwal fi Fadl al-Quran wa ahlihi. So he goes into the virtues of the Quran and its folk. And then he looks at the external rules of recitation. And then he looks at the mental tasks also related to recitation. What's going on internally. So you have the external and then the internal, like mindfulness of just paying attention. And then also in the fourth one, understanding the Quran and understanding tafsir with right and what that means. Because there's hadiths that are very terrifying about interpreting the Quran out of opinion that you might as well take your seat in hell. And but he really refutes the idea that limits the tafsir only to naqal, Imam al-Ghazali, because he really makes a very powerful argument. So these are the four things, and for those of you, this is the only translation that I know of. The Arabic is obviously the best, but if you don't have access to Arabic, there is by Muhammad Abul Qasim, the recitation and interpretation of the Quran. It's a good study. He was a good Malay scholar. At least I think he was. I might be wrong. He might be South Asian, but they're printed in Malaysia, and I know he did his PhD in Malaysia on Imam al-Ghazali. So this is what he looks at. Now to go into the first section, Imam al-Ghazali has a scholastic tradition that influences heavily St. Thomas Aquinas. So for Catholics don't know this, but St. Thomas Aquinas borrowed that whole tradition from the Muslims. This was something the Muslims did, where you give your arguments, you give your objections, and then you address the objection. But generally, Aquinas will always use, like, he'll give the biblical, he'll give passages, and then he'll give the tradition. So this is where Imam al-Ghazali, he'll give you the ayahs, like I did earlier, and then he goes into the hadith. And then he'll have the sayings of the sages of Islam. So من قرأ القرآن ثم رأى أن أحدا أوتي أفضل مما أوتي فقد استصغر معظمه الله. So if you're a hafil and you think anybody, if you see Qarun or Bill Gates and you think Bill Gates is richer than you are, then you don't know what you possess. And that's why Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, he had a Quran teacher to teach his child. And when his child finished Fatiha, he gave him a dinar. And the man said to him, what are you going to do when he memorizes Baqarah? So he fired him. He just said, no, you're not going to teach my son. If you think the Fatiha is worth monetarily, first of all, is a problem. But if you think Baqarah is greater than the Fatiha, then you don't know very much about the Quran. So, قال صلى الله عليه وسلم لو كان القرآن في إهاب ما مسته النار. This hadith, which is weak, but I'll tell you, and this is my witness, it's true story, and there's a witness to this story who lives in New Mexico. He was a dear friend of mine, Fathi bin Halim from Libya, who's from the famous Ben Halim family. His uncle, Mustafa bin Halim, was the prime minister with King Idris. So this man was in the opposition for Gaddafi, and I was staying with him in Granada in Spain. And at the time, Gaddafi was assassinating opposition. So we literally had driven in his car, and I was a student at the time, so I was very young, but I had the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, and I had my Mus'haf of Warsh, both, and I had them both beautifully bound in leather. Like I had somebody from England, Abu Ali from England, bound them for me. And so they were in the car, and we went to the apartment. The car was bombed. It blew up. The whole car was blown up. And I swear, as Allah is my witness, I'm telling you the truth of this story. When we went back to the car, the entire inside was burnt out. The seat was literally, it was just metal. Like and my Quran and the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd were on there, and all it had was, they had like just black around it. I opened it up and they were perfectly intact. And that, you can believe it or not, that's for you to, but I know what I saw. Fath ibn Halim knows what he saw. It's a true story. So I don't know if that happens all the time, but it happened for me maybe I was probably 22 years old or something like that. It had a huge impact on me because I knew, oh, this is real. So it increased my iman. قال أفضل عبادة أمتي تلاوة القرآن. The best worship of devotion of my ummah is recitation of Quran, and that is really important. These are fadail al-a'mal, so some of the hadiths have weakness, but generally our scholars accepted weak hadiths for fadail al-a'mal. This is a very interesting hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala read to the angels, Taha and Yasin, by 1,000 years. And these are mentioned in the books. Darimi was a muhaddith. He has a lot of weak hadiths. So you have to recognize that some of these hadiths are weak. But Imam al-Ghazali mentions them, and they're interesting. If it's weak, it doesn't necessarily mean the Prophet ﷺ didn't say it. It's just we can't ascertain with any certainty that he said it. But we also don't know that he didn't say it. That's a weak hadith. A mawdu' hadith, he didn't say it. If it's very weak, it's likely he didn't say it. But it didn't flunk. I mean, it's important for people to understand. A mutawatir hadith got 100% on the test. A ahad hadith has a 92 to 100. If it's at Bukhari or Muslim, it's more in the 96 to 99. If it's a weak hadith, if it's a hasan hadith, it's got a B. If it's a weak hadith, it's below a B. And then very weak is a D, and then mawdu' is a F. So it's important, you don't throw away a C paper. It passes. It's just not something you're going to hold up as an example. And in our tradition, it's not something that you're going to rely upon, with the exception of fadail al-amal. If it's not weak, but also it's better, you should know that it is weak. I mean, the ulama do say there are three conditions for acting according to a weak hadith, and one of them is that it shouldn't be very weak. And also you should know it's fadail al-amal. It's not something that you, and then that it's not a sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ, it's not his normative practice. خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه is a very important hadith in al-Bukhari. The best of you are those who learn the Quran and then teach it. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى من شغله قراءة القرآن عن دعائي ومسألتي أعطيته أفضل الثواب الشاكرين. In a riwayah also أفضل ما أعطي السائلين, better than what I give the. So here he gives better than the reward of the grateful ones. That's in Tirmidhi. And then this is a very interesting hadith here also about the three on the Day of Judgment who are on a sand dune of black musk, and they have no fear, and they won't have to be taken into account, and when the people are taken into account. And one of them is a person who recites the Quran solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's really very. And then Ahlul Quran, Ahlullahi wa khasatuhu. The folk of Quran, the people of Quran, they are the Ahlullah. That's what they used to call the Quraysh because of the Haram. The people of the Quran are like the Quraysh to the Haram. They're Ahlullah. In al-Qulub, this is a very powerful hadith that Imam al-Bayhaqi relates in the Shu'ab from Ibn Umar. The hearts oxidize or rust like iron oxidizes. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, ma jala'uha? What is the polishing of the heart, or jila'uha? فَقَالَ تِلَاوَةَ الْقُرْآنِ, the recitation of Quran, وَذِكْرُ الْمَوْتِ. That is going to really polish your heart. And then لِلَّهِ أَشَّدُّ أَذَنًا إِلَى قَارِيَ الْقُرْآنِ مِنْ صَحْبِ الْقَيْنَةِ إِلَى قَيْنَتِهِ. that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala listens more attentively to a istima' here, adhanan means, more attentively to the reciter of Quran than somebody who has a singing girl listens to his singing girl, right? And we know how people get obsessed about singing all these people that sing. The external rules of recitation, the condition of the reciter, like what's the hal of the qari? He should be in wudu. He should have a good hay'ah. He should have sakina. He should be wearing nice clothes. One of the tragedies of modern Muslims is they don't خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ masjid. Take nice clothes when you go to the masjid. We should even, Imam al-Ghazali says, when you go to pray, you should go as if you were visiting an amir. Are you going to wear a t-shirt when you go see the amir? Like, what are you going to wear? So it's good, because now a lot of us are praying in our homes, just to have something that you can put on when you pray. Even if it's a rida or something. Obviously the women have, they have more rigorous requirements. Both have to be mastur, but for the woman it's head covering and everything. So that's important just to think about that. And also, he says don't sit غير متربع. So the mutarabbi' is somebody who is cross-legged, sitting cross-legged. He preferred that they sit like the student sits with the teacher, which would be basically the way you sit in the prayer, which is interesting. We don't sit cross-legged in the prayer unless you're sick and can't do that. So it's interesting, that's the way we pray to Allah. So he actually says it's better not to sit cross-legged. I think my own experience of just seeing a lot of the really great shuyukh and things, I think that's probably, I think that's a very rigid opinion. I think cross-legged is, I've seen a lot of righteous people reciting the Quran cross-legged. So, but this is what he advises. If you're able to do that, it's difficult to do for a very long period of time. And not reclining, although it is permissible to recite the Quran lying down. And we know the Prophet ﷺ recited the Quran in the lap of Aisha. It's just better not to. If you're very tired and you have a wird or something like that, then just recognize that it's not the afdal. It's khilaf al-awla. In some instances it might even be makruh. And then the amount of reading. This is really important, and I want to go into this because the amount of reading is, everybody should have some wird of Quran. Everybody. Nobody should not be doing a daily wird of Quran. In Sudan they say, "Li ma عنده wird gird." And if you don't have a wird, you're a gird, like a monkey. It's like, you're not human. So this is really important to have a wird of Quran, just to have some portion of Quran. And so Ibn Mas'ud did a weekly, and that's, according to Imam al-Ghazali, the preferred, that you actually recite the Quran once a week. Now, people who say once a week, it's actually, if you get relatively good at reciting the Quran, it's about 2 hours a day. There are a lot of people, if you think of the amount of time people waste, there are a lot of people that watch 2 hours of film every day, or they'll spend a long period of time reading a magazine, or, this is a reality. People don't like to think about this, but it's just where you prioritize your time. So one of my favorite quotes from Marcus Aurelius is that he learned from one of his teachers never to use "I don't have any time" as an excuse. And that was an emperor of the Roman Empire. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, because whenever I hear that from people, I know how much time I waste. And so I just can't imagine, we're time wasters. Human beings, we waste a lot of time. And so there's always time. It's just where do you prioritize your time? That's the question. It's like when you get a call and they have call waiting. Whenever you're on phone with somebody and they have call waiting, you always know where you stand in the great hierarchy of things with that person, because they say, "Oh, sorry, I have another call," which means this one's more important than you. or hold on. And then they go to that person, they say, I'm on the other phone, can I call you back? So they're letting you know just this person's important, but you're more important. Then they come back to you. Or they ignore that call altogether. And then you know how unimportant that person might have been. So this is the nature of dunya. Like, where is God in the scheme of your reality? Where do you place God? How important? Because this is His call to you. Are you going to answer the phone, or are you just going to say, I'm busy with this other call? Because that calls very often Iblis. Like if it's television, let's face it. So those are the things that we all have to decide. So how do you do this every week? And I'm really not encouraging people to do this. You have to, it's like a marathon runner. You have to work up to this. Don't try to do this. The Prophet said, لَن يَشَدَّ دِينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَ. Don't try to take on this whole deen, you'll get overwhelmed. If you're not doing any Quran, start with half a page a day. Or a page a day. And just keep to that, commit to it, and sustain it. Once you've done that for long enough time, and you're consistent with it, then maybe move up to 2 pages or 3 pages. So, but I'm just going to give you this for those of you, because there's some hufaz here and things. Traditionally, Ibn Mas'ud and others would do something like this, where you go, Al-Fatiha obviously, which is 7 ayahs, so it's very short, but they would do by the odd surahs. So the first 3 they would do, which would be Al-Baqarah, and then Ali Imran and Nisa. So those are 3. That's one day. So you do those 3, and then the next day you start at Al-Ma'idah, 5. So you go 3, the first 3, setting aside not setting aside, but acknowledging that you read Fatiha with Al-Baqarah. The first 3, and then 5, and then 7. So then you start at Yunus, and so that's your 3rd day. And then on the 4th day you go to 9, which is Al-Isra. So you're going to recite 9 surahs. So now you've done 3 on the first day, 5 surahs on the second day, 7 on the third day, 4 on the 4th day you do 9, and that's up to Shu'ara, which is the 5th day, and that's the 11th. From there you do 11 surahs, and then you do 13, which will take you to Saffat. So 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. It's very easy to remember. You just do the odd number of surahs each day building up. So 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. And then Qaf to the end of the Quran. So there's 65 surahs. Qaf is called al-Mufassal. Some say it begins in Hujarat, but the majority say it's Qaf. So that's the beginning of the Mufassal. And those are the ayahs traditionally that you're supposed to recite the prayer in. Because Malik radiallahu anhu says you should recite a whole surah in the prayer. That's sunnah. Not to just take pieces of the Quran. It's a khilaf, and the other imams are fine with that. That was his madhab. So traditionally the Malikis recited only from Qaf, if they were leading the prayer, obviously. So that's, and then Kitabat al-Quran, this was a time when they actually didn't publish Quran. This is before Gutenberg. So they didn't publish Quran. So that's why he's talking about that. It's actually, I hope that if Allah gives me life, I would like to write the Quran at least once. So it's something that maybe, it would be a really good practice. It's one way to really learn the Quran well. And then the tartil, doing the proper recitation of Quran. So it's mustahab. وهو المستحب في هيئة القرآن. Oh, yeah. So he means slow recitation. So technically they're all tartil is tahqiq, tadwir, and hadar. So there's they use these, you'll see these terms used. So sometimes tahqiq is used for tartil. So tartil is slow recitation. But according to Ibn al-Jazari, tartil is wajib in all the types of recitation. Tartil is reciting with tajweed. right? وَمَنْ لَمْ يُجَوِّدْ الْقُرْآنَ آثِمًا, right? So whoever doesn't use tajweed, there's an itham in it. And so that's very important. And then, there's a khilaf about khafi and lahan jali. So I don't want to deter people who might not know the exact recitation rules. If it's a lahan khafi, it's permitted to read the Quran. If it's jali, you can't, which means that you're actually making mistakes in the grammar of the Quran and things. But if you're not pronouncing the idgham properly, or if you have some difficulties like sirajan wahaja, if you said sirajan and you ithbat an-noon, so you actually as opposed to saying sirajan wahaja with a idgham kamil. So in those instances, people should try to learn tajweed properly. It really is an obligation. The majority of ulama say that it is an obligation, but they do give a rukhsa for people so that they can recite the Quran at least grammatically correct. So that's important. So the proper recitation. So tahqiq is very slow. It's for somebody who's learning the Quran, and it's also for somebody who's doing tadabbur. They really want to focus on. And then the moderate tadwir is, tahqiq would be alif lam mim dhalikal kitabu la rayb. It's like it's reciting it slowly. Moderate is going to be quicker. Alif lam mim dhalikal kitabu la rayb. And then the hadar it's fast, but you still should not do the ikhlal. You should be doing the proper tajweed that you do. And this is from Imam Ibn al-Jazari, one of the great scholars of tajweed. وَيُقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنُ بِالتَّحْقِيقِ مَعْ حَدْرٍ وَتَدْوِيرٍ وَكُلٌّ مُتَّبَعٍ مَعْ حُسْنِ صَوْتٍ بِلُحُونَ الْعَرَبِ مُرَتِّلًا مُجَوِّدًا بِالْعَرَبِ. So this is in his famous طيبة النشر في قراءة العشر, which is similar to the Shatibiya in looking at the 10 qira'at. So those are the 3 levels. They're all tartil, although some people will use tartil for tahqiq. You'll see that. And then the external rules, so those are, fulfilling the right of the verses recited. So this is mura'at haqq al-ayat. So if it's an ayah of sajda, you should do sajda. So there's, according to Abu Hanifa and Imam Shafi'i, there's 14. Malik, there's only 11. And I think Ahmed, I'm not sure about Ahmed, but the majority of people are Shafi'i and Hanafi and Maliki. So, and I think there's one that's different in the Shafi'i and the Hanafi. But you'd have to look at that with your teachers. The Malikis only have 11 because they don't have the ones that are in the Mufassal. So all the ones in Qaf, like Fasjud Waqtarib, which is in that's not a sajda for us. Now sajda is mandub. Abu Hanifa says it's wajib, but the other imams say it's mandub. You should do it because it really is adab of the Quran. But if you didn't do it, it's not considered sinful according to the imams. And if you're in a situation where you can't do sajda, then you do subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar 4 times in replace of the sajda. And then it's preferred to recite the Quran aloud unless it's going to yushawish ala nas. And then also tahsin al-qira'ah. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Zayyinu al-Quran bi aswatikum." Ornament the Quran with your words. Some of the Malikis interpret that to be maqlub, so it actually means zayyinu aswatikum bil Quran, and there is maqlub in the Arabic language. So because they said you can't enhance the words of Allah, although there are other ayahs that are pretty strong in that, indicating that. So Allah loves His Quran to be read in a beautiful voice. And then also just recognizing the azama of the Quran. Ikrimah used to pass out when if they opened the Mus'haf, sometimes he would literally pass out. And then when he would come to, he would say, Subhanallah, hada kalamu Rabbi, this is the words of my Lord. So it's a very momentous thing for us. It's not ta'zeeman mutakallim, just magnifying the one speaking. That don't talk over the Quran. One of the things I really hate about modern Islamic behavior, Muslim behavior rather, is they play the Quran in restaurants or in shopping. You go into a market and you'll hear the Quran recited as if it's like background. It really bothers me, because the Prophet said that this book you will grow accustomed to it, and it will grow old for you like a cloak grows old on the back of one of you wearing it. It's no longer new. And one of the things we forget about the Quran is its newness. The Quran, the language that it brought, the Arabs had never heard anything like it. People don't realize this. When they heard it, you can't imagine what they were hearing. They had never heard. There is no language that was like the Quran before the Quran. When they heard these things, they were hearing something that they had never heard before. And they heard that, Mughira and others, when they heard it, they said that this Quran, there's something about it. What is it? The power of it. And so that's really important to remember. The distinction between Hadith and Quran is so extraordinary that it's so clear that they're not from the same sources. The Hadith is the Prophet ﷺ speaking, even though it's revelation through his own words. He's the one saying it. The Quran is not. He's a conduit of the Quran. He is simply reciting what was recited to him. And that's why when you hear the Quran, they'd never heard any of these things before. And then just look at Alif Lam Mim. That, to me, should convince anybody that this is not a human book. Because who could have thought of just putting letters, the muqatta'at? And here's the secret, one of the secrets, because the ulama always say, what's the secret of the muqatta'at? Nobody knows it except Allah. But one secret, I think, in linguistics, phonemes are meaningless. So if you say a, u, I, ba, bu, bi, for a linguist, they say it has no meaning until it becomes a word. Usually by bringing two phonemes together, like yes or no, right? So because that's n and o. What the Quran is telling us, Alif Lam Mim, Alif Lam Mim Ra, it's telling us its meaning all the way down. You just don't know what it means. But its meaning all the way down. That there's nothing meaningless in this universe. It's all meaningful. So even those sounds, those a, u, I, the child when it's crying, all those sounds are meaningful. We just don't know what a lot of them mean. So just magnify, and then mindfulness, hudur al-qalb. وَتَرْكْ حَدِيث النَّفْسِ. Hadith al-nafs is, like the man who said, oh, I heard your khutbah last week, it was fantastic. And he said, he said, it was amazing. I was completely mesmerized the whole hour and a half. And then he's like, I've never given a khutbah more than 20 minutes. He said, it sure seemed like an hour and a half, right? Why? Because when you get bored with something, your mind starts to wander, and then time expands, and you can't wait till it's over. It's makruh to look to see how many pages left of your wird. Like to check, to see, like people read the Quran, and then they want to see how many pages are left. That's makruh. Because it's like saying, when am I going to finish? Right? So just being mindful, deep contemplation, التدبر. أفلا يتدبرون القرآن أم على قلوب أقفالها. Just look up what that means in the Arabic language. Do they not deeply contemplate this Quran? Or are their hearts sealed? So if you're not deeply contemplating the Quran, it's an indication your hearts are sealed. Tadabbur is a beautiful word because tadabbur means to penetrate something to the end of it. The dubar, your dubar is your back. It's the backside. It's your end. So tadabbur is to tafa'ul. It's to penetrate to get to what's on the other side of it. And Ibn Mas'ud said, whoever wants ilm al-awwaleen wal-akhirin falyuthawwir al-Quran. Let him deeply go into this Quran, really open it up. And so deep contemplation. And that, obviously, we need to learn how to do these things also. And then tafahum, again, tafahum is takalluf. It's attempt to understand, make an effort to understand, right? So fahimtu means I understood it. Tafahamahu, I'm trying to understand it, right? Very important. And then also getting rid of the mawani' of understanding. So abandoning the barriers to understanding. So what are the barriers? One of them, أن يكون لهم منصرف إلى تحقيق الحروف. So they're not properly pronouncing it, right? And so it's very important that you deliberate and you get it correct. Also, taqleed. So Imam al-Ghazali was very opposed to blind dogmatic following. So what he meant, obviously we're all muqallidun to a certain degree in this age, but what he meant is don't go into that kind of ta'assub, like a kind of fanatic blind following. Because there's nothing worse than a fanatic blind follower of anything. And then also al-musir ala dhunub. So that will block you, limiting the understanding to what's been narrated in tradition. There's more, far. The Quran, لا تنقضي عجائبه, the Prophet ﷺ said in Tirmidhi, its wonders will never cease. And then there's some external rules again. This is the different takhsis, ta'athur, to be affected by the Quran. And as your heart opens up to it, there'll be periods where you'll get overwhelmed by the Quran. And then taraqi, to ascend with the Quran, yataraqqa ila an yasma' kalam min Allah, like to really feel that it's from God. So it's, one of the things Alama Iqbal said that his mother told him is recite the Quran as if it's being revealed to you. It's a beautiful statement. Like feel as if God is revealing it to you, because it's to you through the Prophet ﷺ. So in that way it is being revealed to us through the Prophet ﷺ. And then recite it as if you're standing before God. Recite it while knowing that God is watching and listening, being in a state of petition, humility, and supplication. We're really here asking God for forgiveness, relinquishing any sense of entitlement. So when you read about the righteous in the Quran, don't feel you're entitled to be in those descriptions. When Allah says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, that's me. No, because they're الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. Do you have khushu' in your prayer? Don't لَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't consider yourselves already there. Have that awe and a sense of, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq said, if I had one foot in paradise and one out, I still wouldn't feel safe till both were firmly planted. So don't have that sense of entitlement. And then why attempt to understand the deep meanings if there is a strong opinion of using one's personal opinion? He goes into this, مَنْ فَسَّرَ الْقُرْآنَ بِرَأْيِهِ فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. He goes very deeply into this. Be careful, be very wary. Opinion is what you think about something, but there are once you learn the rules of Arabic, if you know Arabic, if you've read the tafsirs, if you're not a batini, if you're not saying it really means this, you will have inspiration and insights into the meanings of the Quran. Allah will give those to you, and so that's important. But whatever insights you have, they can't go against the Arabic language, and they can't, unless it's an ishara. Sometimes an ishara, like for instance in the Quran, it says, "Ittaqullah wa yu'allimukum Allah." Have taqwa of Allah and Allah will teach you. That technically is not a jumla shartiyah in Arabic, because wa yu'allimukum Allah is not, it's not jawab shart. So technically it doesn't mean have taqwa of Allah and God will teach you. But there is a hadith that says, من علم بما من عمل بما علم أورثه الله علم ما لم يعلم. If whoever acts according to his knowledge, Allah will give him knowledges that he didn't know. So that gives an ishara in that if you have taqwa, and I heard Marabt al-Hajj when I recited that ayat to him, he said, Alhamdulillah jarrabna, we've tested that, the truth of that verse. And Fakhruddin al-Razi said that he knows that there's no way that he could have learned everything that he knows in one lifetime. Like he knew that what he knew was not humanly possible for a person to learn in one lifetime. So ilham is real, and Allah can give that to people. So also one of in the verses where it says like to go into sajda, and they go into sajda weeping. If you can't weep, you should at least pretend to, not in front of people, but just do tobacco. That's what the hadith says. Like just to at least feign weeping, and maybe weep that you can't weep. And then the exegetes. There are many great mufassirun that came after the Salaf. So even though we should always look at what the Salaf said about it, first and foremost, the Prophet didn't, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his whole life is a commentary of the Quran, but he did not comment on ayahs. There are very few ayahs that he commented on, because had he done so, who is going to say anything about those ayahs after the Messenger of Allah? So he left it for that reason, that his ummah would be able to always find meanings that they need. And the Quran will never end. It just won't. The meanings of Quran will never end. And that's what we're going to get into when we get into Jawahir al-Quran, inshallah. So he goes into some of the reasons for the prohibition, hastening to interpret the Quran based on apparent meaning in the Arabic language without the requisite knowledge, being influenced by their nature and passion when interpreting. So some people will interpret it just for that reason. So people that try to validate heresy, for instance, ignorant people, because they want to follow their passions. And alhamdulillah.